let's finish on a positive note and talk about some of the good things that we see around home education, um, and how it is impacting children today. We've tuned out there. It's been a long afternoon. I've had to, if anyone looks carefully at the video, you'll see me just starting to nod off a couple of times. So my apologies. Um, I had too much of a late night last night and then had to get up early this morning. Anyway,
The thing, the
you can
thing
have
is
a
that
laugh about it.
at the moment we can still do the full range of styles of home education. There are no concerns about that.
Yes,
At the
yes,
moment, home education is still primacy of the parent, and it is still as a family wants to run the home education as long as the child is receiving a full-time efficient suitable education to them, um, which means it can be quite joyous and it
yeah.
can be silly early mornings or silly late nights, or it can be matching school hours, depending on what your family is. But the beauty is you can see the joy in your child as they develop the skills that they want to develop. And actually, you can see them heading on the way to their longer term plan. Um, and
Well,
I think, and
long may that last, Michelle. I'm hoping that we don't
that's what I'm
find that they
hoping.
try and clamp down even more in that and restrict people to more schooly type curriculum.
Well, that's the thing. If they try that with my household, I'll be enjoying some time going through the SAO process because, well, the thing is, I'm probably going to be on the SAO process from the start because there's no way we're letting anyone near in our house, and that's because my child doesn't like anyone coming in the house. So, at the point the register appears, if it's still as it's drafted now, if I'm still on the home education journey at that point, which I'm sure I will be, um, yeah, I will be enjoying preliminary notices, etc., because I'm definitely a family that cannot let someone into the home
Yeah, I think
at
we
the request
really,
of my child.
but I think we really have to impress on anyone we talk to. So whether it's our local authority or ministers or councillors, and so on, MPs, how what they would consider an unconventional education is actually a really good education. And I do love Sir Ken Robinson's videos about things like this. They still hold, um, all these years later, because he highlights, how the education system is actually not suited for so many children. I think it's also worth. I find the conversation, if you're talking to an MP or a council or whatever, and they do not understand why you'd want to home educate, it's often good to take them back a little bit through their own school experience, ask them some questions about their personal school experience, because a lot of people see the negatives of that, but they've never thought about it because it's just the thing everyone did. Everybody went to school, so they've never thought about it any further. And if you can pull out for them some of the experiences that they had and draw sort of parallels of, so as a parent, you don't want your child to feel that way growing up, feeling that way about themselves. And so, that's why you're home educated. You will find, normally you can find, you've got to look for those little points where you can meet them where they're at and bring them a little bit more round to your way of thinking. Um, Ask them lots of questions about their own background, their own education, and their own experiences of the school system. Some of them, the SEND system, because we know that some have had issues with things like dyslexia and so on in school. So we need to find ways where they could see if it was them in that position. Say, for instance, they decide to home educate and this bill passed, it just kind of help them to find their way into our shoes.
Yeah.
That can be quite helpful. But
And I think that's also quite helpful with the consistent identifier bits as well, because there are people who got really good grades but may have been excluded from school earlier on. And the problem with the consistent identifier and sharing all this data, Whereas at the moment, you can limit what you disclose.
Yeah.
Um, you won't have that opportunity, and then some people won't see past the person you grow out of, because it's completely normal as a child to go through developmental stages, rebel at different points. Some children get caught rebelling, some children don't. But just because you were caught rebelling and it gets recorded, because as long as you record something, um it's a good thing. Your outcome at the end should be what's being looked at. So you may end up with a really, really good outcome, but then because this recording now records all those bits beforehand, you may lose out on job opportunities, uni opportunities, um, just because we have a record now where you're not allowed to grow up.
Yeah. Yeah. I think, I do feel so sorry for younger people today and what they're going to have to deal with if all of this stuff goes through. Um, like I grew up with, I mean, when I grew up living in South Africa, we didn't even have television when I was younger. And then of course, technology only came around a bit later on, and I'm so thankful that I didn't have that. I can imagine if there were a few videos of me as a young person and some of the things I got up to, I would find that very embarrassing now, perhaps. So, although I was quite a good girl, but still, there's some things that you do that are silly and embarrassing, and thank goodness there was nobody there to record it. But you sort of feel like if all of these things are going to be recorded within an inch of of their lives, it's like, I don't know. I feel sorry for young people growing up to them.
Yeah,
So
no, I absolutely do as well, because although I did have some horrendous experiences as a teenager, I also had some really amazing experiences that, if things were recorded the way they are now, I wouldn't be who I am now, because I wouldn't have been able to enjoy those experiences in the moment, but realize as an adult, oh my days, what was I doing? But that's part of what makes me, and we're actually limiting how people can grow, because we're actually
exactly,
already saying, just narrowing them, and then narrowing them and saying, well, we're going to record you to within inches of that, and we don't even need your consent before we share this information around. Which is the other bit, is you don't even necessarily know who's getting told about what you were doing, when you were doing it, who with, why, etc. It's just
it's
exists.
it's kind of cringy actually that to me it's kind of cringy that people want to know all the stuff about you. There's no space for you to have that. We all need our privacy, don't we?
Yeah, it was looked into before, because there was a big thing a few years ago about when they were looking at the youth figures, and the disproportionate amount of criminal records for teenagers in the care system. Because the thing is, if you're in a care home, a family home, as a family foster home as they call them, where they family group homes, if you hit a wall or broke something, there was a period of time where they had to report it as criminal damage. Whereas if you were actually in your parental home, you'd be pretty unlucky if your parents chose to report you to the police for criminal damage. You'd probably have chores for years, or consequences, but they wouldn't involve a criminal record, because no one would go and report it officially. Whereas because you just happen to be in the system, they needed the insurance to pay to fix the thing. So the default then is it gets reported, because they need the crime reference number to get the insurance to pay to fix the thing that you broke in anger and frustration because you needed support to understand your situation. And we don't seem to have learnt from that, because we realised from that it's like, we need to actually try and encourage people to have proper family situations, as opposed to do a false family situation, because this isn't fair. But now we've almost forgotten that and gone, oh no, we'll just record everything. Doesn't matter. We'll just record everything and ensure it, and share it.
Well, Alison, I know you've got thoughts on the recording of things, um, where when what we find often in these the local authorities and so on is that they'll record the things, but it doesn't mean that action's actually being taken or anything is being done about it. There's the box ticking nature of, so a lot of the requirements of this bill will be required that somebody ticks a box, but it doesn't
Yeah. So
necessarily mean it
so
will actually protect the children.
so back again to the series case reviews that Joe and I looked over in some detail. A lot of them, there was a lot of recording of issues, and we can look at Sarah Sharif's case. It's a case in point. Lots of meetings, lots of talking. They looked at her before she was even born. They had a child protection meeting about the unborn child, and said that she was at risk. So lots of talking and lots of recording and no action whatsoever. And it is a feature. It is a feature of social services intervention. Lots of talking, lots of meetings and no action. It's a bit like the support issue, lots of talking, lots of recording, no actual support, no material support, etc.
Just I can say I did it. I can say I offered it, but that's it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, signposting, a piece of advice that's useless, whatever. He's not. I gave a talk to my local library this morning about neurodiversity, and one of the examples I used was eating issues in autistic children, and the number of times I've heard, oh well, just offer them lots of different food. If they're hungry, they'll eat. And we will have a lot of this. We'll have a lot of meetings, a lot of people sitting around the table, sucking through their teeth, going, well, no, it's not good enough. I mean, how many times do we hear of social services coming round to a child's home and they will say, you are neglecting your child. That's it. Nothing else. You
Yeah.
are neglecting your child. No pointers as to what to do, no practical help as to what to do, no understand, no teaching about nutrition, no teaching about how to do housework. I went into somebody's house many, many years ago. She was an investigation by social services, and they said that she just didn't have the skills to run a domestic environment. And I looked up, and the curtains were held onto the curtain rail by safety pins because nobody had ever told her what a curtain hook was. Now, that would have been simple. If I'd been the social worker, I might have even gone out and bought a packet of curtain hooks, showed her how to put them in the curtains, and said, this is how you hang your curtains up. It's the tiny things that don't get done where you could make a world of difference.
Yeah.
But they won't. They'll just sit around and record things, and there'll be piles and piles and piles of useless information, half of it inaccurate, and nobody will get on and do anything.
Well, I think the thing is that I do feel we have a problem in this country at the moment where there are some people who are parents now, but they were perhaps never properly parented by their parents, so in terms of knowing how to run a home or how to prepare food from scratch. Um,
Yeah.
how to help your own children,
Hmm.
um, how to potty train or any of these things. You've never done it
Hmm.
before, and your parents never showed you. Perhaps you had a dysfunctional home yourself, and that didn't happen. And what you're talking about, just simple life skills, which really
Hmm.
doesn't take a lot. That if I don't mind the idea of their, what they call their best start, whatever hubs, which is meant to be like the sure start hubs. Why not name it the same thing? I don't know, but anyway, I think that is it about empowering the parents. It's a very positive thing. If it is going to empower the parents, but if it's just a matter of, okay, I'm just going to see you and look at you, and if you look okay to me, moving on next, um, and I'll just record that I saw you. That's not helpful, and I think we need a very different approach in terms of that support, of genuine support, because I do believe parents are the bedrock of society because we are responsible for raising the future generation and for passing on, im- information, for passing on and advancing um, values and that kind of thing. And I believe that the state, by trying to take more power away from parents, I believe they're actually going to just make that situation worse. So they're not empowering parents. They're not trying to make parents take more responsibility for their children, which is where we need to go, the direction we need to go. So where parents take more responsibility for their parents, for their children, I mean. But they're going in the opposite direction. And, it is very concerning because we do have a lot of young people that do not have adequate life skills. They keep telling the schools to teach it, and that's not where it should be happening. It should be happening in the home, in my opinion. Yeah, so that's very worrying. So anyway, Joe, since you've joined us back again, thank you very much. Nice to see you again. We want to end on a more positive note, and we've kind of covered almost everything we wanted to talk about. So, is there anything you feel we haven't covered? Any of you that we should just bring up? Have we been that comprehensive? I'll go and have a look at the comments, see if anyone's got questions for us. Actually, please ask. I am mainly looking at the event comments. I'm not really able to go to all the different places where this is streaming.
Where are we streaming? So I can just quickly.
So we're streaming
it.
on your Stop the School Spill page. We're streaming on the
I've been replying when I see
Yeah.
them on my page.
Yeah, we're streaming on the action group, which I haven't seen many comments when I've gone to look. And we're streaming on the Alliance page and on YouTube, the Alliance event page. Yeah, so I think if anyone's got questions, go for it. Put them in the chat. We'll try and pick it up. But I think we do need to be thinking more proactively. We need more research, don't we, Joe? Perhaps let's just talk a little bit about maybe getting people to consider how they can help offer more research to help us in the future.
Yeah, I can speak to that point directly, actually. So we'll have a soft launch coming at the end of January for a new research centre, headed up by myself and a small group of others. That will be the Centre for Elective Home Education Research. It will focus on collating and collecting a repository of research as it relates directly to home education, and in the hope that we can kind of address the knowledge gap that sits within policy and wider areas. And a lot of what you hear when you do research in home education and you engage with other agencies and institutions is that there's not a lot of research. Research doesn't exist or is hard to find. So to address that, with developing the research centre, compiled huge lists of research and currently trying to categorize that to make it easier for people to find it. And that will be launched. That'll be launched soon. And part of that, part of the ethos of the centre is a no research about us without us. So we will be looking for the community to come on board in different aspects to support the research centre. And one of the things that we're really keen to do is the research that has been done on home educating communities is we want to liaise with those communities. One, to support co-creation of research that's relevant and meaningful to different communities within home education, rather than it being research or institution led. And we also want families to come forward to review the research that's been done by us or others that's already existing. So we'll provide you with the material where it's open source. We're looking at permissions for closed source, but for open source research, which means there's no paywall behind it, it's free to access to the public. We want you to reply as a review to see how you feel about the research that's been done on you. So trying to encourage really proactive engagement with research, and it's a big part of changing policy to prove that there's research and to have the community give their feedback on what they think about it. I think it's really important. So
yeah, so which areas would you say we need more research in?
I think the research on motives is often what local authorities, DfE, and other institutions want to see. There's a kind of almost a fixation on why, what's the motive? But actually, that's been done to death. And when you look at motives for home education, actually, that doesn't really change a great deal across time and across countries. It's very similar reasons consistently. But I think there's more on a kind of micro level. I think there is specific research that's relevant to different communities, and that's both regional and cultural and age based. So, and also, looking at home education, um, looking at the way families approach home education, um, what works for different neurodiversities. So it's looking at, and also just looking at the way, for me, looking at the way policy makers engage in research, because we know, for example, a lot of policymakers only have access to a small library of research, and a lot of that doesn't include home education research. So, but I think again, I'm reluctant to say too much, because I think actually community members, families, probably have their own ideas about what research they want to see. As a home educating family, home educating your kids in your area, you're going to have questions about what's important to you. And I think that's the voices we need to bring forward and be looking at the research on.
But what do you think would help with the political situation? With what information do you think would be worth getting out there?
I think for home educators now, with the bill going through, I think research that families can sort of support is collecting evidence of practice. So keeping the letters or the emails that have been sent to you, documenting your experiences. So even if you don't want to keep a diary, you maybe stick a note in the calendar on your phone, or WhatsApp yourself a message, just a reminder of the processes that you're going through, what's happening with engagements with local authorities, and also keeping photographs and notes about your home education, because I think later down the line, those are also going to be important for understanding and forming language that's meaningful to authorities around what you're actually doing. Because a lot of families, I think, don't always use, the language that a teacher uses or a local authority uses. So keeping a record and a diary of what you are doing can be useful later on for communities to help you translate that into language that local authorities might recognise as education.
Yeah, I think it's worth having some research on different approaches and then the outcomes for the child, possibly. Like what?
I
Yeah.
was exactly going to say that. I think it would be really useful, and looking at things like at what point a child learned to read and what educational level they reached by the time they were 25. Things like that would be amazing. Looking at some research that goes back and looks at proper outcomes, because that's what they're so obsessed with things like
Outcomes,
reading,
outcomes,
aren't they, Jo?
outcomes.
Yeah, they are absolutely obsessed with outcomes.
But they're
And
not really. It's disingenuous, because whenever anyone offers them an opportunity we could potentially survey the existing business, they don't want that. So they make out that we'll have negative outcomes, but they don't want an evidence base. So they give a perception of being obsessed with outcomes, but they don't want an evidence base that might show that their belief that only the school mechanism works might be sort of pushed off its little pedestal. So it's one of those sort of, we'll keep saying
that's
outcomes.
true, but that's true, but we don't have that research out there that's really got a solid base, have we, Jo? There's no really solid outcomes research.
But
I think
that comes
actually
back
that's
to
hard
them
to
not
do.
wanting it as well.
But no, it's academically not been done. It's not been done.
No, but Alison, I'm not meaning that way. I'm meaning for sourcing the funding for it, because ultimately you also need then the funding to be able to do the research properly. And if there's a real motivation to want that research done by certain departments, the funding sources appear. So when there's we want this, but there's no magical funding grant appearing in the sphere, then the want for it is like surface level. We obviously need it so that we can demonstrate what we anecdotally think we know. So we do sort of need it for that purpose. But others saying that they want it, then the fact the grants and budgets to do it don't exist yet and haven't existed in the past, they haven't really wanted the answer.
So I think there's a tension there,
Yeah.
I would say. So there's a tension in that when they talk about outcomes, what they want is empirical data. They want numbers and they want to be able to compare it to school. And there's a blinkered view there. So the lens is, okay, well, we measure schools by looking at progression, GCSE grades, and attendance, for example. You can't measure those same things in a school. So when they talk about outcomes, what they want is a comparable outcome to school. And where the tension lies is that that doesn't really exist in a comparable way with home education. And the outcomes that are valued by, say, the DfE, institutional or other kind of actors in that sphere isn't the same outcomes that are valued by families. So if you talk to home educating families or look at the research, what's often valued is as an outcome of education is how happy is my child? How well or easy did they find it to enter into the particular career that they wanted? So the comparisons are not doable. You can't compare the two things side by side. So that creates a tension. And then what you value or measure as an outcome is so different that the research then isn't maybe seen as quite so valid or important or useful by DfE or local authorities, for example. So there's a mismatch. So I would say there is a desire for outcomes, but they want comparable data, and that's not going to exist. And doing outcomes with families is also difficult because different families value different outcomes. So how do you decide on what outcomes you're going to measure, and are they measurable in a way that institutions can look at it and make a decision? So there's a tension there, and I think there is strong reasons why that hasn't been done. Not that it doesn't need to or shouldn't be, but strong reasons why that hasn't been done by academics.
I've just had a thought. Do you know the Children's Society do this annual children's happiness survey
The
thing?
Good Childhood Report.
The Good Childhood Report. Do you think we could have a word with them and ask them to have a subcategory of home educated children and compare the happiness of children who are home educated and their self, because they do it like a self-reported mental health thing, don't they, in it? And do that as a comparative with school children. I think that would be really interesting.
Yeah, I think it would be. I mean, sorry, Joe. I just want, in America, some of the studies that were done, but they were done a while ago, and we would be better to have our own research. Things that included like what was the family's sort of financial status, economic status, what was the education level of parents. And one of the reasons they did that is to show that it didn't really matter, that parents who didn't necessarily have a high level education of themselves, that it didn't really negatively impact the child. I'm not saying it would necessarily be a foregone conclusion that that would be the result, but it would be useful to have that information if it helps, to show that actually, if the parents didn't go to university, it doesn't mean the child can't go to university after being home educated. That kind of thing would, I think, be extremely useful as well.
So great minds think alike, and actually I've had those conversations.
Our minds we're always simpatico, Joe.
So I actually have had those conversations, and one of the perceived barriers was that in school, children are perceived to be free to answer honestly as they think because they have no other influences, i.e., the parents aren't over their shoulder influencing their option. So one of the solutions that in the discussion that's been posed by myself is whether or not there is an option to have community centres used as a central location, and then the young people can go in as if it's an exam, go in and then do it without the parents over their shoulder. But these are the conversations that come up that children may not be free to answer. And to be honest, in some, playing devil's advocate, in some households, that may well be the case. But if the solution to overcome that is that maybe there's community centres or halls where kids can go and do the survey, then that might be a way around it to both have the engagement with the community.
But these children feel free to talk in front of their teachers about how they hate school.
It's the perception. And so we quite often in policy, you're not dealing with the reality of a situation, you're dealing with the perception of the person in charge or in control. And those are the things that are really difficult to navigate, that seem obvious and sometimes stupid to the rest of us, but those are the things that you have to navigate. So I think, yes, it's a good idea to extend like the Good Child Survey and others like it to home educating families, and then look at the ways we can navigate some of the politics and preconceived ideas to make it workable.
It's actually
think
interesting,
they're
Joe.
also,
Sorry, I just want
There
to
also
add.
needs to be a little bit of context if we did something like that as well, though, because I know if the question was asked, like, how's your mental health been since you've been home educated? But if it was just a pure thing on your mental health on a scale of 1 to 10, if somebody's just come out of school or been out of school for 3 months, they may still rate fairly low, but they may have been a 1 before and now they're a 4. So absolutely, I think with the right context, there could be some incredible research done, and it's something could be done actually on a very informal low scale through organizations such as kind of the one that I work with and others that we're kind of connected with. It would be quite nice to maybe collect I know oh gosh, I'm rubbish with names. Joe, is it Progressive Education?
Oh, Progressive Education,
Yeah,
yes.
obviously
Their
that might be
survey.
something they're quite interested in doing, kind of a almost child reporting survey. So yeah, I think it would be good to have, more data that can be used, even if it was to build up to something more official.
Well, I'm thinking if one was looking at more long-term outcomes, you're not talking about children necessarily doing the survey. You're talking about people who've come past, completed their home ed journey. Basically, sort of just giving feedback on their journey. But anyway, I think it is worth looking at. But I wanted to just raise something. You mentioned this point about children in school sort of being able to more objectively complete a survey. One of the reasons we took my daughter out of school when she was 7 years old was because of a specific teacher. One of the other children in her year did not want to go to school, even when it was a movie day, because I will still be in her power. There's so much for that. Can you imagine? Yes, can you imagine a teacher wanting to sort of like help children answer the questions, for instance? Anyway, there's a reason why they make some children stay at home when Ofsted comes to visit. Okay, so yeah. But I do think we do need more research, and I think I want to encourage anyone. We have had so many home educating mums come through their home ed journey and go into academics because of their love of learning, and wanting to do more, wanting to know more, wanting to further their own education. Harriet Patterson was one of them. So she was a home ed mum, and my friend Alice Kamasia, who went and did research. And just a little truth bomb about home education: it has a way of changing the parents. And so you do find parents often, it's a very interesting phenomenon. And this is one of the things that they don't well, certainly the government is not really aware of it, because it is not really just about the children. It can be about the children, but it actually ends up not being just about the children, because home education transforms families. It changes our relationships with one another, with siblings and so on, being able to watch their baby brothers and sisters grow up and learn their first words. It changed me for sure in how I relate to my children, in how I view learning. So what I started out as is very different to what I ended up as. We're understanding just how beautiful it is when learning happens in a natural way. But but it also inspired me to pursue my own passions and interests, which is kind of why I'm here today as well. And I'm sure why many of you are here is because you've discovered passions in yourself and interests, and in furthering your own knowledge and understanding. And this in turn inspires your children when they
Yeah.
see their parent leading the way, their parent becoming confident, their parent becoming vocal, becoming empowered and speaking out. It also hopefully is going to inspire your children to find their own passion, their own area where they can become excited. And you see it also when my kids went for their interviews for college, and they're talking about something they're passionate about. It's not just what they've been taught at school. They actually are interested in the subject. They want to be there, and they demonstrate it through every word. And you see that huge positive for young people who've learned how to tap into their own their intrinsic motivation for learning. Um, and this is what we don't see. It's seen in a very two-dimensional way by these politicians, home education. But it is so much more. And I think this is what we really need to be talking about, how positive it is for families. So I'm just going to check if there's also any new comments. I don't see many.
Can I can I raise one thing I think is also
Yes.
really useful for communities to do, which kind of tags on to what you were just saying, is that what I often hear from different sort of, whether it's Facebook or online groups, is that quite often when families' kids have grown up, then the adults tend to kind of leave the groups. But I think at this time, and I understand if you've got people coming in, you want to kind of keep the group tight as, just those currently home educating. But I think there's a really important role for families who have children who are now grown up or aged out of kind of home educating, because they have the experience of home education,
Yeah,
but don't have the same level of risk of speaking out. And they
exactly.
also would be really good advocates and support should you have a home visit, for example, if they're willing. So I think there's a really good space that we can make within groups and communities for those kind of veteran long-term home educators, those with grown-up kids, or some adult grown-up home educators to be on those supporting roles and kind of be connected, stay connected to the communities. So I think that's
Exactly.
something that we
I
can all
think there
think
is a
about.
very important role, because also sometimes we have a little bit more time and so on, although that's not really the case for me. We're coming kind of to the end of the afternoon. I'm glad that we finished on a slightly more positive note. I do want people to consider if they want to get into doing some research, because I think that could help with the political landscape as well, to really just allay some of the fears in proper black and white figures that we actually have proof of, proper evidence, not like some of the figures we're shown. But before we go, I really want to just I want to promote the protest. Just trying to find where it's gone. So I just want to talk about that. So next Saturday, the 17th of January, in London, Russell Square, we are having this march and rally, the Children's Wellbeing and Schools Bill rally. And basically we need a lot of people there, a lot of people. So please, can I encourage as many of you as possible to get there? This is your chance. This may be our last chance to really be properly visible and vocal. And it's going to be, I think, a really significant event. It might be a historic event. If we get enough people there, it will truly be historic. And I'm sure you all want to be part of home ed history in this country. This is your chance. So the other thing is, in order to support this rally, we have a fundraiser. Let me see if I can go and find the fundraiser as well, because I've got too many windows open as usual. And actually, here's a little challenge while I'm looking for it. Can I ask, oh, I don't know where it is. Sorry. Can I ask if you're watching right now, let's just push that number up a little bit on that fundraiser. I'm going to, sorry, I've just got to try and find it. I've got it. Okay, so since we've been talking today, the fundraiser has only gone up by about £6. Okay, that means I didn't do my job very well. So let's get this up. Let's get this up. Let's see if we can, by the end of the weekend, get this amount up to 3,000. How about that? Please share it. Or if you're able to give a few pounds, please just do what you can, but share it, and let's try and get this up to 3,000 so that we can help cover some of the costs. There are individuals who are bearing the financial costs at the moment of the shortfall. And that's not really fair, because there are people that have made a lot of sacrifices to do this, and we want to see, we don't want them to be out of pocket for something that benefits all of us. So let's see if this weekend, by tomorrow night, let's see if we can get this up to 3,000. That would be absolutely amazing. Share as much as you can, please, and just ask people to give what they can. I would even love it if in real time we were seeing that number go up. That would be amazing. No, still 2672. Come on, guys, you need to give a bit more. So I'm just going to encourage you to help us get this up to the 3,000 mark by tomorrow evening. So we are at the end of our evening now. I'm just going to say thank you to everyone who participated. It's been such an honor to be on this panel with all of you discussing the issues. I hope it's been encouraging and helpful and empowering to everyone who's taken part. Thank you so much.
Thank you.